great to be in the house of the Lord today, is it not? What a weird week of weather have we had. I remember just Thursday, it was a balmy, whatever it was, because it was much colder than it should have been. And yet today it's supposed to hit 71. Only in Texas, right? Only in Texas. Turn your Bible, please, to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9 and 10. Going short verses. Yeah. No, remember I told you I'd refund you the underage of last week's sermon this Sunday. So, I am nothing if not consistent and a man of my word. So, there'll be other verses we will be looking at. You go, but these verses look familiar. Why, yes, if you've been reading the bulletin and things like that and attended the commitment banquet, these are the verses we used. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with your first fruits and with all your produce. Then your barns will be full with plenty and your vats be bursting with wine. I know, kind of let the cat out of the bag. You now know that this is a sermon on tithing. And just watch. Glazed over eyes everywhere. Oh man, he's going to preach on tithing. Every time I hear a sermon on tithing, it's just that they want more money, or man. Every time I show up to church, he preaches on tithing, and typically on a business meeting day too. Am I right? Where's Brother Raymond? He usually amens. He's out anyhow. Yeah, tithing is an aspect of the walk of the believer, and that very statement. That very understanding, the fact that when you hear the word tithing and you go, oh man, I'm out of here, and your brain checks out and runs away, and you hear the doors closing and locking behind it, reflects the attitude I wish to address this morning. Because I can tell you that many times we have been taught that tithing is an essential thing to do from a very pragmatic way. And we're going to address that because the pragmatic way is we have focused upon the results of tithing, not the reason for tithing. And since we're results-based people, we like to focus upon the results. Notice here in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9 and 10, he begins with writing about honoring God from your wealth. And then he moves into from your first fruits. And then it sounds like every health and wealth gospel sermon you've ever heard, because then your barns will be full and your vats will be overflowed. Man, this is awesome. The problem with this is typically when we come to the Proverbs, we forget what the author is doing. The author in Proverbs is setting things up in stark contrast. This is a book designed to teach young men in the Jewish society, and so they set these things up in very stark contrast. If you read a few verses above, it talks about also the fear of the Lord and understanding about the things of God and how all these things work together for the gaining and the attaining of wisdom. And one of the things a wise man does is that he gives to the Lord from the wealth that he gets in, not just from the 10% that he's supposed to tithe. The Lord has richly blessed you, then you are to honor the Lord from your wealth. The Lord has richly blessed you, and you are then to give that in return to Him. Now, we like the second half. We really love the second half of the verse because it almost gets a quid pro quo approach to tithing. I give to God, God gives back. And I'm sure you've heard that preached to you before. Give also of your firstlings. Why? Because then I get. See, here in Proverbs 3:9, I give to get. I give to get. It's kind of cool. Money makes people weird. You ever see an ugly debate in a church? I guarantee you it's almost about guaranteed every time how money is spent. Am I right? Go to a school board meeting. or a city council meeting. Typically, it's about how money gets spent. Why? Money makes us very weird. And for believers, it really makes us weird because we believe it's ours. It's my money. And then I get to give it back to God. No. Dear child of God, it is not your money. It is God's money. And He gives it to you. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute. It makes us weird because somehow we think it's ours. Also, when we start talking about money, we start thinking about percentages. Oh. And as a pastor, you think that sometimes I don't hear conversations. But I hear conversations. I've heard conversations in churches that I've worked before where, well, you know, Brother Ashley, the New Testament doesn't say anything about tithing. Apparently, you're not reading the same New Testament I'm reading. Let's talk about giving, and we'll address some of that later on. You know, Brother Ashley, what percentage can I give and be in good with God? See, it's very pragmatic. It's very results-based. What percentage is acceptable to God, and then I'm good, and what percentage gets me a little extra? Like if I put like an extra 5 in the plate, do I get like, you know, a camel? That'd be like cool, wouldn't it? No, not really. And so we approach it from these aspects because we want the full barn and we want the vat overflowing. And a lot of guys will seize upon this and preach this. And you're misusing Proverbs when you do those things. You're also presenting tithing from a very practical and pragmatic way in which we give to get. And the fact of the matter is the opportunity for us to bless God back. Honor for your first fruits. When you see this and you go, tithing is a law concept. Tithing is an Old Testament Jewish concept. The fact of the matter is, no, tithing predates the law. The first tithe that's recorded is between Cain and Abel. And it's the same language here that's being utilized of bringing your first fruits. Abel comes to the Lord and he brings to the Lord his firsts. The text actually gives you really good indicators as to why Cain's sacrifice is rejected and why Abel's is accepted. And you can always tell when I went to seminary, because guys that went to seminary very early on, very much later in 70s, 80s, it's always about the blood. Start looking at the Hebrew context of that. The language is about Abel's being the firstlings and the best, and Cain's being an offering. And the text draws that it's the attitude in which it's brought. Abel brings of the best, of the fat, of the firstlings, of the choicest of what he has. Cain, if you look at chapter 4 of Genesis, brings an offering. And that's how the Hebrew records it. And the text also indicates that the Lord tells Cain that if you were to do well and bring your best, I would honor that. We know the end results of that. See, prior to the law, here's sacrificing occurring. You also have a problem with Abram. Abram gives a tenth to the king of Melchizedek, who also happened to be the priest of Salem. So you have pre-law tithing. Job. You have huge problems with Job if you want to tie tithing simply to the law. So people, a lot of times they come to church and go, oh, it's not a New Testament concept. No, it's a biblical concept. Prior to the law, during the law, and after the law. And the concept is that you bring your best. Notice that that's what chapter 3 of Proverbs is saying. Bring the best, and then after you have brought your best, if God has blessed you, bring of your wealth. And it seems to tie that then all of a sudden God will make your barns full and your vats overflowing. And again, like I said, that's very Proverbish. And it's very pragmatic. And it's very reasoned response. And we'll see why we should tithe. Jump ahead here. When we talk about tithing, we ask ourselves this question, why do I tithe? If I were to poll this room, and please, I'm not going to, please don't shout out answers. Why do you tithe? Some of you will say, well, I tithe because the Lord has promised to reward me. The Lord wishes to bless me, and so because He wishes to bless me, I tithe to get blessed. Very similar to that, some people would answer, well, the Lord has promised to open the treasury of heaven and give to me as I tithe. I tithe to prove that I can't outgive God. And these are results of tithing. They're not reasons to tithe. Some of these are actually biblical results from tithing. Some people go on with tithing as, well, if I don't tithe, the Lord will take it from me. Have you ever heard that one? My spouse makes me tithe. You know, I wasn't a tither, Brother Ashley. Then I married my wife, and every month before that check had hit the bank, she'd already wrote a check out. You hear the answers? Very practical, very pragmatic, very selfish-based answers. I give to God so He'll return to me a portion. He's already given you 90%. They're very pragmatic, self-centered answers in which I give to get. Well, I'm a leader in the church. I have to tithe. That's how I was raised ever since I was a kid. I was always taught that 10% goes to the Lord. And these are nice things to teach your children, but they are results driven. They are not reasoned driven. It's divorced totally from the reason as to why you tithe. Well, I tithe to get on the good side of the man upstairs. This week I send a little extra, so you're getting an extra 20 this week. I tithe so I get to say or have a say in what the church does with the money. Find that one in Scripture for me, please. All of that is reasoned or results-based of tithing, but it has divorced itself totally from the reason why you tithe. The reason why you tithe is not to get. The reason why you tithe is not so you can appease the man upstairs and he'll go away. The reason why you tithe is that it's an act of worship. It's one of the acts of worship that is given out. And we'll look at that. If you want to look over, you can, over to Deuteronomy chapter 12, starting in verse 2. You can go to verse 1 if you want. You shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations whom you shall dispossess serve their gods. On the high mountains and on the hills and on every green tree you shall tear down their altars and smash their sacred pillars and burn their Asherim with fire, and you shall cut down their engraved images of their gods and obliterate their name from the place. You shall not act like this towards the Lord your God, but you shall seek the Lord at the place in which the Lord your God will choose from all the tribes to establish His name there for His dwelling, and there you shall come. And you shall bring your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, your contribution of your hand, your votive offerings, your free will offerings, and your firstborn of your herd and flock offerings. There also you and your household shall eat before the Lord your God and rejoice in all your undertakings in which the Lord your God has blessed you. You shall not do at all what we are doing here today, every man doing whatever is right in his own eyes. For you have not yet come to the resting place of the inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you. When you cross the Jordan and live in the land that the Lord is giving you to inherit, He gives you rest from all your enemies around you so that you can live in security. Then it shall come about that the place in which the Lord your God will choose for his name to dwell, there you shall bring all I have commanded you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tithes, your contribution of your hand, your choice votive offerings, which you will vow to the Lord. And you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, and the Levite who is within your gate, since he has no portion in your inheritance. Be careful, you do not offer your burnt offerings in a very cultic place you see, but in the place which the Lord has chosen in one of your tribes, there you shall offer your burnt offerings there, and there you shall do as I command. It is an act of worship. You will not behave in the way the pagans do. The pagans had a very formulaic way of tithing to their God to gain favor with their God. They brought an offering, they put it on the... Whoa, look over, it's off the stage. Put it on the altar, killed it, burned it, whatever, and the God that they did it for was appeased, and he blessed them. Did that sound familiar to how we tithe? I give so God gives me back. That's pagan, folks. That's a pagan concept. The results of our tithing and worshiping God is that God will bless us. Sure, yes. But if we take the results and put it in place of the reason, we are no better than pagans. You come and you obliterate all that the pagan does, and then I will establish a place of worship, and there you will bring everything. And you will sacrifice it there. And you will rejoice in it there. Notice the rejoice is tied there a couple of times. Not, well, it's that time of year. Time for us to go up and give the Lord his cut. And he gets the best. I can't pawn off my sick animals on God. You're to bring your best there. Notice that the attitude, though, is not one of, well, I guess I have to do it. But you get to do it. It should be an aspect that when you put it in the plate, it is a moment that is rejoiceful for you to do, as opposed to, well, if I don't, I won't get blessed. It's a very sad way of understanding tithing. I get to tithe, not I have to tithe. I get to worship the Lord with my tithe, not, well, here's your cut. Folks, he's not getting a cut of your tithe. You're getting a cut of his wealth. See, what happens is we put the emphasis in the wrong place. We put too much emphasis upon the wrong syllable and expect to have a great result. And this is usually how the health and wealthers go. They take this and run. Give to the Lord, he'll give you back. No, look, sometimes give to the Lord, and he may not give you back anything of wealth. It's not tithe that when you give money into the plate, I put $10 into the plate, when I go home and the checking account will be $20,000. It's not like that. We expect this quid pro quo. That's a pagan concept when we come to deities. I give to God to get, I give to God to get, I give to God to get. Give me. It's a very selfish concept. We come to worship God. We come to worship God not just simply with the words that come out of our mouth. Look, folks, it's easy to sing songs, right? I could sing of your love. There's nothing worshipful about that thing. You've heard me sing. I'm not going to trouble you anymore with that. Just committing to that voice, droning on with that song. You can sing that and be thinking about what you're eating for dinner. Right now, some of you are listening going, man, I hope he gets done before the Cowboys come on. Since I'm not a Cowboys fan, I'm okay with that. See, you can sit and look like you're worshipful during the sermon. I can tell by the glazed eyes, if I ever looked at you, that you have tuned me out because I mentioned money. Tithing is one of the more tangible aspects of the worship of the one true God. It is the one thing that requires you actually to put something there. And your attitude reflects how and why you tithe. And whether or not you honor God with your wealth and your first, or you honor God with something. I get to give to God because God has richly given to me. I get to give to God because He has richly blessed my family. Or, I got to give to God because if I don't, the preacher will preach another sermon on tithing. Probably will. But it has nothing to do with whether or not you give to God. It's because it's a concept of worship. Don't behave like the pagans. Tear down the things that the pagans do, because when they went and sacrificed to the pagans, they came and brought offerings in a quid pro quo system. I give to you, pagan deity, so I and my crops won't fail. My wife will be fertile and bear me sons. My children will grow up and have great names and great wealth. That's a very results-based understanding of tithing. Come to the Lord and worship me with this. And rejoice in the tithe. And rejoice in the offering. And rejoice in the free will offering. And rejoice in the firstborn consecration offering. And there, we worship together. Deuteronomy 14 says almost the exact same thing. I have it up here. I could read it for you if you'd like. Why do we tithe? We tithe not to get. It is nice that that is the end result from a gracious and loving God. Now, because I worship the Lord and follow after Him and what He prescribes things to do, that He graciously rewards me for obedience. But that's the end result. And a lot of times what we do is we take the result and we put it in for the reason. And the minute we do that, we've shifted from being godly to being very pagan. We tithe as a concept of worship. Well, that's great, Brother Ashley, but we're not under an obligation to tithe, because that whole New Testament thing, tithing's not mentioned. Air conditionings aren't either, but I'm enjoying it right now because it was hot in here a minute ago. If you go and look in the New Testament, especially around Mark chapter 12, I believe it is. Don't have to turn there. We're going to talk about. That's the section of the widow's mite. And notice when the widow comes up and she puts her coins in, clink, they go in, and the conversation begins, who gave the most? Notice Jesus didn't go, well, technically, neither one of them did because I'm doing away with tithing when I die. Did you ever see him say that? You can read both of them. We're giving away to tithing. Tithing's going to go away just like everything else. Neither one of them gave the most. Notice he makes an emphasis. Who gave the most? The woman that put the 2 cents in. Why did she give the most? I can hear the answer, but I can't hear the answer. She gave all she had. Look, you can formulate a very good argument from that verse and all the way through the book of Acts that tithing in the New Testament required an all-in perspective. Give it all. Look at how Jesus addresses the rich young ruler. These things I have done since a boy until this day. Okay, fine. Go and sell all that you have and give it to the poor and come and follow me. But I'm a rich man. And that's the point. You look at Acts chapter 2, then which they, is it 2? Yep, it's 2. In which they sold and gave and pooled, and that way there were no needy amongst them. Acts chapter 4, there was no needy amongst them because God, the wealthy there sold their land and provided for all. It's a very all-in concept in the New Testament. See, I make an argument. Well, now we're happy with 10%. See, it's not tied to a number, folks. It's tied to an understanding of worship. When you understand that worshiping God is simply more than just mouthing words in a cute song or paying attention to the guy whose hand keeps moving because that's how he talks with his hands. When this hand hurt, it stuttered, though. I'll wait for the rest of you to catch up with that one. That's not worship if your mind is turned off. Conversely, putting something into the plate, as in the case of the widow's mite, isn't necessarily tithing. Notice what Jesus said. These guys gave of their excess. These guys gave of their wealth. These guys gave, and they had more to give, and they made a show in their giving. There was nothing worshipful about what they did. There was nothing God-honoring about what they did. What they did was very self-serving. Much like approaching it from I give to get approach. I give to get. Let me placate a pagan god. What do we tithe? Well, in the Old Testament, one of the reasons why they tithed was the maintenance of the Levites. If you understand this, the Levites were a non-landed tribe. And so the only way for them to provide for themselves was the other 12 tribes gave, and then they had possessions in which to eat. One of the reasons why we tithe is for the maintenance of the minister or ministers in our case. Oh, here it comes. He's asking for tithe for his salary. I'm asking for tithes to support the ministry of the church. And part of that is the maintenance of the church's servants, of its ministers. Some of it is to keep these beautiful glowing things on that we like to call lights. Some of it is to provide nice warm heat on cold, cold days and nice, cool, reconditioned air on hot, hot days. And since we live in Texas, we get both in the same day. Part of it is to keep this building clean. Part of it is used to help those who are in dire need. And this week we have helped many of folk who were in need, either because they could not pay a bill or because they had something that was broken and needed to be repaired. And it was designed out of someone's tithe, someone's gift, someone's offering that provided for that need. It's not so I can have a bigger house. I like my house just fine. It's not so I can have a nicer car. God has richly blessed me with a nice car. It's not so that I can get more money and then increase my salary. I'm content with what the Lord has paid me. It is so that you have the opportunity to worship the Lord here. And then those things are results of that action. What do you tithe? If you tithe based upon a results-based model, you will resent it. It'll be something you resent doing, and it'll be something that you will choose not to do when times get tough. When hard times come, you will begin to weigh the option of paying your tithe or paying your bill. Tonight we're going to have a video that we're going to show, and I'm not going to ruin who's talking about. So for those of you that would like to see this evening, it'll be shown this evening in lieu of the regular service. And the author talks about some of the reasons why we should pay our tithe first. And one of them is that we pay our tithe first because it's an act of worship. And that we pay our tithe before we pay our debtor because that's a biblical model. If we loathe the tithe, when it's actually should be a concept of worship, then when we get stuck in those moments, we're very easy to sell it out. I was having this conversation with Stephanie the other day. We really don't miss, and I'm sure those of you who tithe regularly can attest this, we really don't miss the fact that that money is gone when it first goes. Our life has adjusted around the fact that that money leaves first, and we don't base our income on that money. It's gone. It's the Lord's. And we worship the Lord with it. It's because we don't load the tithe. Is it hard to tithe? Sometimes, sure it is. I'm sure there's many of you that have been here where you had more month at the end of your than you do pay. This is the other side, what the author of Proverbs is bringing around. In those moments when you honor the Lord with your first, in those moments when you honor the Lord from your wealth, then those things happen. It's not formulaic. See, don't listen to me go, well, he just said it's formulaic. No, it's not formulaic. But over time, you will see where God will continue to bless you in those things. But when we take that results base and put it as the reason, that's when we get lost. Do you honor the Lord from your wealth? Not from your 10%. I mean, that's easy to do for some folks. It's easy for us to calculate 10%, throw that in a plate. But do you honor the Lord from your wealth? Today is Commitment Sunday. You will have a card out. And one of the things that we try to do is we try to up our tithe every year above 10%. The church does that with its when we give to the associations. We up a percentage of what we give to the associations so that they also can have a way of providing services for us that benefit us. Do you honor the Lord from your wealth? Or are you strictly tied to your firsts? Only my first. Only my first. The mindset behind that is a self-centered mindset. Well, God only needs 10%. We're not talking about a flat tax-based system here to run the government off of. Why do we tithe? Do we tithe from a very selfish give to get? Or do we tithe from the fact that it's actually a part of the worship service? It's the opportunity for the body to worship the Lord in what He has done. This is where we get to put our faith into action by trusting His provision. Or do we just give because I have to? One is a higher expression of faith in the Lord, and the other one is very much a faith in yourself. You'll begin to loathe what you do when you tithe. It'll be easy for you to skip it when you do. When you fill out your commitment card, on there, you are committing to tithe X number amount, monthly or weekly, for a year. And we ask you that you put that on your calendar to remember. So, man, you want us to remember that? Yes, I actually do. And if you love the tithe and you embrace the tithe and use the tithe as an physical aspect of worship within the service today, then it's not an issue for you to do. And think about it. If I were to say I love Stephanie, but at every time Stephanie asks me to do something, my response is, oh, gosh, you're so needy. Can't you do it yourself? Jeez. Well, if I want her to make dinner, I better go do this for her. We won't be married very long. And neither will you. Not to Stephanie. To your spouse. If you develop in your relationship with the people you claim you love a very pragmatic approach to them, a results-based response to them, how many friends do you think you will have? People know when you're using them. The pragmatic approach I give to God to get is using God. The attitude is, I get to give to God. God has blessed me with pay. And folks, those of you who go, man, I am poor, let me put it to you. Poor really is a sliding scale of where you live. I guarantee you there is nobody in this room who is so abjectly poor that they would like to trade places with a Sudanese Christian right now. As a matter of fact, if you were to take Americans by whole and compare them against people who live in other places where they have nothing, you, in your poorest state in which you live, are far more wealthier than those people ever will be. But you use it as an excuse. What do you tithe? Why do you tithe? Why do you put down on the commitment card the number you put down? Is it from your excess? Is it from your firsts? Or is it as this should keep God happy and there I'll do it? Is this an act of holy obligation of worship? Or is it to shut the pastor up so we can move on? Why do you tithe? At this time, I'd like the ushers to pass out commitment cards if you need one. If you need one, please raise your hand. This is a decision that you make between you and the Lord. It is something that you do. I won't see them. I think Brother Jim is the only person that sees these cards. Am I correct, Brother Jim? And he doesn't tell me what you put on them, and I don't want to know. But this is a commitment you make between you and God. When you make an oath unto the Lord, you are required to keep that oath unto the Lord. Period. You should do it from an act of worship. We are here today to worship the one true God. I think if you shift your focus from the I have to I get to, you will find the joy that talks about in Deuteronomy chapter 12 and in Deuteronomy chapter 14. You will find the passage where Paul says the Lord loves a cheerful giver to have more meaning than what we typically understand it to have. Moment here, I'm going to go. I'm going to sit by Stephanie. And we're going to take a few minutes of just quiet time for you to contemplate what to put on your card. If you're a visitor and you're not filling out the card, I understand. When we come through, I'm going to lead off and we're going to place our cards in. Please feel free to remain seated where you're at. But this time, we're going to move into some quiet contemplative time as you consider why you tithe and how you tithe.